I am, by the way, not in my house. I mean, I don't remember this from last time, Howard. Also, when it comes to Iranian ton-and-a-half warheads, I do not stay in my house that does not have a safe room. And during the night, I don't like having to walk to the bomb shelter, which is a 3.5 minute walk away once you get there. So I'm at my sister's. So I sleep here and then I go home in the day. So that's why I have also different background than usual.
Okay. Well, the time has just gone 8 p.m. South Africa time. It's 8 p.m. in Jerusalem as well, 1 p.m. in Washington, D.C. And across the Middle East, 10 p.m. in Dubai, 9:30 in Tehran. And a big welcome to everyone who's watching us this evening. We're broadcasting this evening on Zoom, on Facebook, and on YouTube. And it is a great privilege to have two of the best military analysts in Israel joining us this evening. I said to Miri Eisen, she is our only guest who has come 4 times onto our webinars in the 192 broadcasts that we've done. I mean, you have some very big shoes to compete with Miri. She is the best favorite communicator in Israel that we have in South Africa. And we're so delighted to have her back. And we are really greatly honored to have you join us as well. We began these webinars for the South African Jewish Report at the beginning of COVID. We've been watched about 7 million times since we began. And just a very quick reminder just before we begin, the Jewish Report publishes online and in hard copy. We publish online on a Wednesday evening, but you can also go pick up your hard copy of the Jewish Report newspaper. It's distributed in places like Checkers and Pick and Pay and Dischem and Woolworths. You can find them around the country in about 240 locations. The headline in this week's Jewish Report newspaper: South Africans are scrambling for flights all over the Middle East, not just in Israel, but in places like Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Bahrain, around the entire Middle East. Go pick up your free copy. We also, of course, are in all the schools, all the kosher butcheries, all around the country, but you can also go online, www.sajr.co.za. Obviously, SAJR stands for the South African Jewish Report. You can either download the entire edition, or alternatively, you can look at each of the individual articles as well. And don't forget, as well, you can get us delivered into your email box. We have about 38,000 people who read us 3 times a week in their inboxes. So you can go to a little bit.ly link, SAJR inbox, and subscribe for our online newsletter as well. Gilana will put that link into all the chat sections on YouTube, on Zoom, and Facebook as well. And don't forget, all of our past webinars are available both on YouTube and the Jewish Report website. And the last thing that I'm going to tell you before we dive in is on Sunday evening, Paula Slier. I don't know, Amir and Miri, if you ever met Paula Slier, Russia Today Middle East correspondent. She was in Tahrir Square during the Arab Spring. She was in Libya during the fall of Gaddafi. She was with ISIS. She was in Ukraine, in fact, booted out by the Ukrainians as well. Left Russia Today, came back to South Africa, met a man, fell in love, married him, and he took her for every single cent that she had. On Sunday night, Paula is going to take us through this unbelievable journey of a hardened war journalist and how she fell in love with a con artist. And so that's on Sunday evening. You can point your camera at that little barcode on the screen now, and that will help you register for Sunday evening as Paula tells her absolutely remarkable story. So with that, we're delighted to host this evening together with the JNF, with the Jewish National Fund South Africa. Michael Kransdorf, thank you so much for joining us this evening. We have so much to discuss, and so we want to dive straight in, if you don't mind. Lots of questions, lots of short answers. And if you don't mind, I'm going to begin, and maybe, Miri, I can start with you. Why do we actually have a war going on at the moment?
Because Israel's strategy changed after October 7th. This is a direct continuation of, in the sense of the failure of October 7th, but of the changes that happened in Israel's strategy, which means that we now are not delaying, we are not putting things off, we are facing the threats that we think that are existential threats, and we're doing something that in military terms we call preventive or preemptive. That's what we're doing now against Iran. That's why it's now. It's called not waiting until they have the capability and after they have it, but trying to destroy the terror capabilities that they already have, and to do so preemptive, before it becomes what it already is, such a huge threat, but it already is as an existential threat. That's why now I could be more specific about timetables, but the change is the change in Israeli strategy. We choose the time. We're going to prevent it. We're not going to wait around and see and try and delay it the way that we did in the past.
Are you suggesting that, in fact, it was inevitable that this war would happen, or regime change would, in fact, be a desired outcome after Iran had armed Hezbollah, trained Hamas, funded all of these proxy armies? Was war with Iran inevitable after the 7th of October?
As long as the Islamic regime of Iran, and I want to differentiate for everybody between the Islamic regime and the Persian people, 93 million, that may or may not support the regime, but we're talking about the Islamic regime. This regime, certainly under Khamenei, Ali Khamenei, who would say in his own voice, and I followed his tweets, believe you me, he put out a lot, calling us the cancerous tumor of the world. I think that what happened after October 7th is the understanding that it isn't just rhetoric, that buildup that the Islamic regime has done over dozens of years, the buildup of their own weaponry, the buildup that they did in all the different ways of the proxies. We first went against the main proxy, Hezbollah, in 2024. And it was really from there after that, going first time directly against the capabilities of the regime in June of 2025. And now it's the continuation of that kind of policy, which says they can change their rhetoric, they can change their actions. But right now, their focus on nuclear, on missiles, on proxies, that focus, together with the rhetoric of destroying us, we've gone out to preempt it. So I don't know to tell you if it was inevitable, but it was certainly something that you didn't want to sit around and wait to see if it was going to happen.
So, Amir, what is the strategy? What is Israel's strategy, and what is the United States strategy? What do they want to achieve from this war?
Well, first, to me, this war is the same war. It started in the 7th of October, and it's still ongoing. Yes, we had something that looked like an operational stop. We focused at a certain point at releasing the hostages and creating some kind of process in Gaza. But I said it then, and I said it at the beginning of the year, that the first 6 months of the year will fully go back to war. And I mentioned that probably Israel and the US will fight together against Iran. It was obvious that it will come. The war is long, it's complicated, it has different stages, but now the goal is crystal clear. Cut the head of the snake, bring down the Iranian regime, and with it all its proxies. When we said at the beginning of the war there can be total victory, this is total victory. The ability to do a regime change. And I would even bet that we'll have peace with Iran before we have peace with Saudi Arabia. We're going to change things entirely. And you see already the reaction. You see now in Lebanon, they understand that this is going towards a regime change and victory. And now the Lebanese suddenly are emboldened. They are kicking out the revolutionary guards from Iran. They've been controlled by Iran for years. But now they see it's game over. And they're starting to move faster, opposing Hezbollah, and things are changing on the ground very, very fast.
Are the United States objectives and Israel's objectives exactly the same, or is there a degree of divergence between the two?
So I think that we're definitely very much aligned. I see all the time in the press throughout the war, since President Trump took office, again and again, people trying to claim that there is some kind of daylight between Israel and the US. There is no daylight between Israel and the US. We're completely aligned. We want to achieve the same goal, change of regime. We both understand that this is an historical moment that will enable to bring Iran into the side of the West, distance Iran from China and Russia, make Iran change alliances and side with the West. And as the US and Israel are doing so, also prepare for peace agreements, for really enlarging the Abraham Accords, an alliance that will extend all the way to Indonesia, Malaysia, Oman, maybe Pakistan, who knows, Saudi Arabia, Lebanon. I think we are moving towards a very different reality, a big alliance that will be both military and economical with new trades of routes of trade, and Israel becoming really a kind of regional Singapore, where all world trade will go through Israel. Israel will become a corridor of energy, also connecting the Saudi pipe to Eilat and from Eilat to Ashkelon. So there are many big issues that are on the table, but the first step is dismantling the Shia axis. And by the way, it's not going to end just with Iran and the Houthis and Hezbollah. We haven't forgotten about Hamas, and Hamas will go back to fight probably in a month or two, dismantle them and demilitarize the Gaza Strip.
So, Miri, Saturday morning, I must say I was a little surprised. You saw this enormous build-up that was happening, the pressure was mounting, but there also seemed to be negotiations, report that the negotiations were being well. Did you have any doubt that the dam would break, that war would actually break out?
I want to remind us, all of us, that even now there are still negotiations, not the open ones, not in Geneva, not in Oman, but when you are in the high intensity of war, the only way you end the high intensity of war is also through talks, meaning I am positive that right now there are Iranians trying to talk to United States in all sorts of different ways. And I say that because that happens during the war. So it's not just on Saturday, meaning you had negotiations which were about preventing the high intensity war. And we're at the stage right now because the opening gambit of Iran in this type of one was one that was unacceptable completely to the United States. I want to remind you all, we're not sitting in the negotiation room. The negotiations with the Islamic regime of Iran were done by the United States and by additional countries, and it was mainly focused on the nuclear. One of the changes that happened over this last year, and that is one of those things that happened because of the change, if you asked about, is it the exact same between the United States and Israel? You know, Howard, that I'm a person of words. And I want to remember words even in the Israeli context, okay? We say Israel, we talk about the government of Israel, we have opposition, we have different ideas. And in the United States right now, I absolutely think that we're aligned in the United States with this administration. And I absolutely think that there is an enormous opposition to everything going on right now inside the United States from other people. And they're also American and they're not against the law. And you know, and I say that because on Saturday morning, I think that it was an opportunity which again had to do with the change that happened in Israel, but also the change of administration that happened last year in the United States. And this isn't about Biden bad, Trump good, or vice versa. It's about a change of view of how you achieve that aim, but also on how you view the threat. I love the vision that Amir just gave, but to me, that's still a vision. Iran is a country that's 93 million people, 93 million. It's a very large country. And in that country, there are absolutely millions of people who totally are against this regime. But Howard, it's also about education. And inside Iran, education for the last 47 years has been the Islamic regime's education. And that means that there are lots of people that bite into that harsh terror Islamic regime type of ideology, so that on Saturday when it happened to me, it's against the capabilities of the Islamic terror regime. That does not yet bring about regime change. Those are two different things, and we need to focus right now that we're destroying the terror capabilities, the missiles, the launchers, the different places that they make them, the drones, let alone the fact all of the different units that both are the units that use all of those different weaponries, but also the ones that train, supply, and arm all of the proxies. We're attacking the proxies. Hezbollah right now, because Hezbollah joined in, I don't know that they gave us the excuse to do so. But this is something where we were looking at it, and if somebody had come to Israel, or for that matter, I think to the United States, from Iran, and said, okay, we're not going to do nuclear, and we're going to stop supplying the proxies. And the missiles, they're not really, you know, but that's not what they were saying. They were trying to Persian, how can I say that? You know, they were more than willing to negotiate us all to death.
They were in a Persian carpet shop.
Okay, and in that sense, I think that when the United States and in the meantime, you're building the military capability to be able to do this kind of an attack. That doesn't mean that you have to do it, but the only way the threat was credible was by building up that capability. And as soon as they came to the table and their opening gambit was, oh, we're not willing to talk about anything and not really nuclear, and let's go back to what we did then. In this case, this administration, because it has to do also with the decisions that happened in Washington, was willing to take the step and said, okay, enough is enough. Let's at least destroy as much of the capabilities that they have built over the last 24 years and not just let them continue to delay and build capabilities. So it's the handful of all of those together. I've been waiting for this for much longer than just this last Saturday, and I didn't know it would be specifically Saturday. That's usually dependent both on the operational and what's happening in the negotiations and on the intelligence. At the end, it's, when the moon is in the 7th house and Jupiter aligns with Mars, you find that point where at the end it comes together, and it came together on Saturday morning.
Your reference to hair, I appreciated really well. Before I ask Amir how you actually conduct a war like this, Miri, maybe you can just give us an overview of the last 5 days, because it's been quite difficult to actually understand what's happened. There's no one source of information. We don't really know what's happening in Iran itself at the moment. What has happened? Have they attacked the nuclear sites? Have they gone after all these production facilities that you're talking about? What has the last 5 days, if you sum up in 2 minutes, look like? And then I'm going to ask Amir how you actually run a war like this.
Okay, so to be clear, it's a joint US-Israel mission. That means that both Israeli and US, different types of air platforms, have been attacking Iran from Saturday morning. What you do is what we are doing together, when I say we, it's Israel and the US, is we're attacking a different list of types of targets. And that target list is not focused on the nuclear the way that it was in June of last year. It's there, but that's not the focus. It's been focused first and foremost on the regime and the regime sites and the missiles to make sure that we, as much as possible, diminish the capability of the missiles. So there, what you want to do is attack the launchers, because the less launchers, the less capability they have to launch those missiles. So you're going after the launchers, but also after the installation sites. To achieve any of this, you need air superiority. So what the US and Israel are doing is taking out any kind of anti-aircraft or aircraft on the ground to make sure that they don't try to stop us. So that's something that you're doing mainly in Western Iran, but you need to do it all over. You're going and attacking the missile sites, the launchers, the silos, the places that they hold all of these different things. And in addition, it was attacking lots of regime sites. And of course, Khamenei himself in that initial meeting, which was, I think, the trigger for the exact specific date, was let's take him out while we're doing that. Iran responded by attacking already on Saturday, not only Israel with their different missile capabilities, they immediately went and attacked the different Gulf countries. Now that's been in an upgoing crescendo. So I'll just end this by saying that what Iran is doing is it's attacking United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Oman, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, keep on going, because as it went on and it grew, it was going from the countries. They were going after the oil sites, the gas sites, air sites, saying that they're attacking the Americans, but attacking all sorts of different things. And then they expanded it and they attacked out in towards Cyprus, and they attacked today towards Azerbaijan and yesterday towards Turkey. And you're going, why are they attacking everybody? And I'll just end this portion by saying that from an Iranian point of view, the more you attack, meaning all of these countries, the countries that rely on the export of oil, on the export of gas, and on being the tourist mecca of the world, if I talk about UAE, what you've done right now is created an impact where these countries are going to try and tell, mainly the United States, stop fighting because we can't export oil, we can't export gas, meaning it's to create them into impacting them to try to impact the United States to stop. It's less about impacting Israel. In that we're hand in hand, but the United States is the one that defines. So that's what we're saying. The Israeli attack, the Iranian response, that response that I'm not sure people are aware of. I was talking before to Australians, and they actually are not really aware that UAE has gotten hit by more missiles than Israel, and I'm talking cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, by more drones than Israel. The distance is much shorter, so it's much closer and easier for Iran to fire against them. Was that enough? 2 minutes, more than enough, and we can always expand.
Absolutely. So Amir, tell us, if you're going to run a war, people say at the moment we're in phase one, it's taking out the air defenses and the capability to stop. What are the phases of a war like this? How does one actually run and conduct a war against Iran?
So Israel and the US have been planning this war for many, many months, building tens of thousands of targets that need to be hit. And the targets that were chosen are of many, many kinds. There are military targets. For example, the Iranian Navy that the US is dealing with. The US sank more than 20 ships of the Iranian fleet, almost all the Iranian fleet, maybe all of it by now. Then you have ballistic missiles, you have the nuclear sites, you have all the regime infrastructure, and this includes also the Basij forces and the Revolutionary Guard who have been butchering the Iranian people and are being targeted systematically by the US and Israel, who are degrading them, really with the goal to create the terms for the Iranian people to rise. We have to remember that something big happened here. We went on a preemptive attack on the 12-day war to stop Iran from becoming nuclear and to degrade dramatically their ballistic missile capability, which we in Israel view as an existential threat. They were on their way to produce thousands and thousands of ballistic missiles that they could have overwhelmed Israel, even if it's not nuclear. We see how dangerous these ballistic missiles are. And this attack, which included also killing scientists and part of their leadership and military leadership, was so successful and surprising. And of course, the US joined and attacked the nuclear sites, that it broke the deterrence of this regime that existed many, many years, internally and externally. And this created a reality where the Iranian people felt emboldened enough to rise and start demonstrating on a massive scale. And then we saw President Trump calling the people to storm the centers of government and saying help is on its way. Following that, tens of thousands of Iranians were killed and many, many, injured. And they took 47 days for the help to come. But I think that at that moment, understanding that this regime is not going to stop. They will always seek the complete destruction of Israel and the US. And by the way, it connects really well to, we celebrated Purim now. And one of the amazing moments in the story of Purim is when a man comes to his family and he brags. He says, I am the most powerful person in all of Persia, and I have this amount of money and respect, and I'm so strong. But then he says, but none of this matters if Mordechai doesn't bow. And this is exactly the state of mind of the regime. Iran is a huge country. It's a beautiful country. It's full of riches. They can prosper, they can be an amazing state. And the only thing this regime cares about, the only thing, is destroying Israel. They hardly have water. They don't have electricity. The currency is broken. And yet they spent, just since the 12-day war, $700 million on Hezbollah. And they're producing around-the-clock ballistic missiles and renewing the nuclear program. They're obsessed with the destruction of Israel and the US, the big Satan and the small Satan. And I think there is a deep understanding, both of the President Trump and Netanyahu, this regime needs to go. So you cannot destroy a regime and do a regime change just from the air. You need a kind of boots on the ground. But in Israel and the US view, the boots on the ground is the Iranian people. And the idea, I'm telling you, this is the operational idea. This is not my personal view. I'm telling you what the plan is to create the terms for a regime change by completely destroying the Revolutionary Guard, the Basij forces, all the infrastructure of the government, all the leadership, As we are doing that, of course, we're also dealing with the military threats, where we want to dismantle completely their ability to produce ballistic missiles and, of course, destroy all the launchers. At the same time, destroy the multiple sites, nuclear sites. There are 100 different sites that are connected to the nuclear program. All of them are being targeted now with B-52, with B-2, with B-1, with the IDF, different capabilities that are being used. Basically, the way the operation was built, we divided Iran geographically. The US is dealing with the eastern part of Iran, the southern part of Iran. Israel is dealing with the western part of Iran and the north part of Iran. But then, a part of the geographical division, there is also specific targets that each one of the countries is dealing with. As I mentioned, for example, only the US is dealing with the Iranian Navy. Israel is not dealing with that. So there are different targets, and what the US and Israel try to do is really understand what each country knows how to do best. For example, we excel at toppling, leaders and targeting specific people, and this is why the initial attack, the first few minutes, was Israel targeting 40 Iranian leaders, both military and political. This is a unique capability that Israel has. And the US has other advantages. Israel started very strongly. When we look at the first 4 days, Israel attacked 5,000 times. The US attacked 2,000 times. But the US, it's a giant that takes time to accelerate, and they are accelerating more and more and more. And I would assume that in a week, we'll see the US in all its might and power. We have a ballistic missile on its way. So we'll see the US accelerating. The president said we just began. It's not even a week. We're just starting. And already now the attack is overwhelming. This time, unlike what happened 47 days ago, the US and Israel are very careful in calling the Iranian people to go out to the streets and storm the regime. They're saying to them, wait, let us degrade them first. And when they will be degraded to a certain extent, then probably at a certain point, Israel and the US will call the Iranian people to go back to demonstrate and be part of bringing down this regime. I think we're in an historical moment where we cannot do what the US did in Venezuela. Just take the same kind of people with the same ideology and then put them in charge. Then maybe it will work for a year or two, and then they'll go back doing what they do. These are very radical people. And I think that Iran, culturally, is very, very different. This is not Gaza, it's not Hamas. Iranian people are educated, they're smart. Most of them love the Jewish people. Most of them have a basic tendency for democracy. Yes, of course, there is also people who have been educated in a certain way, but it's a very diverse country, also with many different ethnic groups. 50% of Iran, it's not Persians. You have 25% Azaris, you have Ahwawis, you have Kurds. There are many minorities there, and even within the Persians, many of them are not supportive of this regime, and they remember other times. And it will be interesting to see in the coming days how things evolve.
So, Miri, you're an educator, so I think I can ask you to mark things out of 10. How's Israel done? How's the US done? How's Iran done? How's Dubai done? How are these countries actually performing if you were to give them a score out of 10?
Wow, that's like a really hard one, Howard. I kind of feel, in that sense, it's like, don't you want to give A pluses to everybody right now out of 10? I think that the Israeli-US militaries are doing 10 out of 10. And when I say 10 out of 10, remember that we're talking about militaries. That doesn't mean everything is perfect. But I have to say, when it comes to Israel, it's quite awe-inspiring on many different levels. And that's true of the US. And I say, sadly, the US, okay, we're also getting the early alerts. It just means that I may, in another 5 or 7 minutes, have to leave. I just need you to know that up front. I'm not sure about Amir, but it just depends as it develops. When we talk about that right here, right now, it's an awe-inspiring aspect of the intelligence, the operational capability. I want you to understand for a moment that when you have, it doesn't matter if it's an unmanned or manned air vehicle, okay, a plane of different types, it's flying over 1,000 miles, like 1,600 kilometers there and back. Just think of a little thingamajiggy, whatever, did they tighten it enough? Is it okay? It's quite amazing. Tfu, 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 after 6, almost 7 days that this has gone so well. So that's the 10, okay? And the US, I would say, are probably a 9, and I apologize to the US where I was born, but I don't think they're as fine-honed as we are, perhaps because we've been fighting for the last 2.5 years, and I think that the cooperation is a 100 out of 10. Okay, it's unbelievable, the cooperation there. When I look at Iran, Iran is functioning. And I say that in the sense that Iran didn't fall apart over the last 7 days. We killed the supreme leader. We killed the top 40 people. We've been attacking all of these different variety of sites. We're arriving at absolute air superiority, and the country has not yet fallen apart. And I'm not giving it in that sense of high points, but it means that they were also preparing themselves, that they immediately had said, instead of me, there's going to be this guy. It's like they're continuing to function. They're not functioning. But you're seeing, I can show you in a graph, how they're not managing to fire the rockets, that the missiles that they want to do. They're not managing to do what they wanted to do when it's based on them. They're being much more impacting in the Gulf area, which is nearby Iran, than they are against Israel and all of the other areas that they'd like to add in. So who else aside from Iran, US, and Israel?
UAE seems to be taking a pounding, as does Bahrain.
I think that UAE should be commended from all of us, okay? UAE built itself over the last 2 decades as a modern, advanced Arab Muslim society. It's something very different, not a democracy. I said a modern, advanced Muslim society. It's supposed to be, to its own way, a safe haven, okay? And they have had, I actually have, I follow the data all the time, and they put it out. That's me who needs my glasses. But they've like intercepted 770 drones. They've intercepted drones and missiles and ballistic missiles. They're trying to give a kind of calm there. And I'm going to say, in that sense, in the military sense, they've used the systems that they bought. They've tried to intercept and to stop. Are they now going to go join on in and attack Iran? I don't think so. But that has to do with the long-term game. They're right across the Persian Gulf from Iran, and they're going to view it in a different way. But they have been absolutely trying to give, but having said that, they're under very heavy attack. It has stopped the Emirates from flying, which is, like it's a pretty big airline there. People are stuck in that area. It's very difficult to get out. And so, as I say, I think that they're trying to very hard. On the media over the last week, I've had a lot of ones where I've been together with somebody from Bahrain. We don't talk about Bahrain. Bahrain is mainly Shiite. And so when Ali Khamenei was killed by us, and he's down in hell, and I don't regret that in any, that was very important. Okay, it has to do both with the figure. I mean, he was for 43 years, he was the leader. He's the one who called me the cancerous tumor of the world, in that sense, as Israel. He's got a lot of really strong ones there, building plans to annihilate Israel. But he also is the religious leader of the Shiite world. And that means that there's a duality that for Shiites right now, they want to mourn. I'm not talking, that doesn't mean they support the terror Islamic regime of Iran. And I can't do that distinction. Okay, he's the head of the terror, head of the snake, as Amir called it before. Okay, and taking him out was very important. It'll be a change of generation there. So I think that these countries there have been trying to handle it. I've been less impressed in that sense. I mean, the fact that Kuwait, there was a very unhappy friendly fire taking down of 3 US aircraft over Kuwait by, those are things that happen inside war. Happily, nobody was killed there, but it's really challenging when you look at that to see how much they have to change what they're doing. I just heard an interception, but I'm not sure why, because it shouldn't be near me, but who knows? That's called noises outside our windows in Israel right now.
So, Miri, quickly, just in case you have to run into your bomb shelter, how long is this conflict going to last for, this war?
If it's up to Israel and the targets that are so important that Amir enumerated before, and here I'm talking about militaries, at the least another 10 days, if not 2 weeks. It has to do with the capability of going there, coming back, having that air superiority, and really systematically going after the targets. The flip side of that is going to be how long can Saudi Arabia not export oil? How long can Qatar not export gas? Because both of them have closed off their gas export and their oil export. That is going to impact you in South Africa, the United States, India, China, other countries that are already, you're seeing the oil prices rise. So in between those, I think that it will certainly be an additional week, if not more, but those impacts are going to start pressuring a lot more as the days go by.
Is it possible that at some point in time, Israel and the United States run out of targets?
Sadly, no. It's called 47 years of an Islamic regime. A lot of targets, okay? Here it's also you go back, you revisit targets. And I have to tell you, we've been fighting Hamas for the last 2.5 years. And what can I tell you? Hamas still has all sorts of capabilities. I'm not talking about the same level, but that goes to show, and that's Hamas in the Gaza Strip that's right next to us. So yes, you're going to have enough targets. I'm more worried in the sense that as time goes on, there's wear and tear and capabilities, that high intensity, it takes its own wear and tear. So it's not about not having targets, but at some stage along the way, Howard, the hardest thing is when you say stop. Okay, that's the hardest thing because you have more targets, because you could do a little more, because they're not out in the street, because we haven't done the regime change that we want. I'm giving you all of the challenges. And then you get to that stage where it's like, so you do another day and another week. And on that one, I say, so to me, it's a minimum of week, 10 days. And again, the pressure is mainly because of the oil and gas, but it could be longer than that.
Before I hand over to Michael, who's going to ask questions about Iran's response and the military strategy relating to that, I want to remind everyone watching a few things. Number one, this isn't just the conversation of the people on the screen. Use your chat function in Zoom, Facebook, and YouTube. Ask any question, anything you want discussed, please post it and we'll make sure that those questions and comments are brought to the panel. That's number one. And number two, if you are watching us on YouTube, please click the like and subscribe button. That allows us to communicate with you much easier. So if you do us that favor, that just allows us to bring you more programs and more broadcasts like that one. Michael, I think I'm exhausting the panelists, so I want to give you a chance to, no one's run off to a bomb shelter or Mamad
No,
yet.
mine's clear. I'm okay.
Yours is
Okay.
clear. So
I
Michael.
don't know about Amir, but I'm okay.
Yeah, okay.
You're good, Amir. Okay, great.
Cool. Mike, over to you.
Can I ask how you'd rate Iran's response to the attack? I know the American Defense Secretary said that it was an unfair fight, but what can they do, and how do you think they have responded so far, and what actually can they do against this overwhelming force from the Israelis and the Americans?
So obviously, Iran cannot stop Israel and the US. We reached the point where we basically are dominating Iranian skies completely. And from that moment onwards, we're going to do whatever we want, when we want, where we want, and how much we want, us in the US. So what is the strategy? What is Iran doing? Iran knows that there is one thing that worries Americans and the president, certainly looking at elections in November, is cost of living, is the price of energy. So this is exactly what they're dealing with. We remember that not long ago, the president addressed the nation. He got to talk about Iran after an hour. The first hour was talking about economy, because this is what, is important for the American people. And the Iranians know that. So they're trying to put two kinds of pressure. One is raising the prices of oil. They try to do it in two ways: close the Hormuz straits and stop trade. Now, I don't know how effectively they can do it because their whole navy was sunk. And I think that the US is perfectly capable of keeping the Hormuz straits open, or they're supposed to be capable to do it. And the other thing that the Iranians are doing is are shooting the oil fields, the refineries. And I don't know if you notice, but Israel and the US are not shooting the Iranian refineries and oil. We could have obliterated them in an hour, all of them, everything. Could have set back Iran 100 years. But Israel and US are not doing so, and that we're not doing that because there is a day after. If you do a regime change, you need this country to thrive. They need to have an economy. So while they are shooting oil fields and refineries and trying to really stop production of oil, at least for now, Israel and the US are not shooting their refineries. They're all concentrated in one island. It takes minutes to destroy this, but it's not being done. But they're trying to raise the prices of oil. The other thing that they're doing by shooting all the countries is put international pressure on the US. But actually, it's backfiring on them. You see country after country understanding where this is going. They understand that this regime is about to fall, and they are now siding with Israel and the US. Lebanon is a very good example. Suddenly, they got emboldened and they are dealing now with the Iranians on Lebanese soil, and they are much more emboldened to fight Hezbollah. We see Saudi Arabia that lately seemed distancing from normalization and getting closer to Turkey, and suddenly Saudi is saying we're going to fight, and they are backing the operation in Iran. You know, everybody likes winners, and everybody wants a stake with success. So as they see the resolution, the power, the might of Israel and the US fighting together, they're starting to move towards aligning and joining. We see it with Britain, with France, even Spain. We heard the Spanish at the beginning of the war. And so everything is shifting now towards a creation of a kind of coalition. Everybody wants a stake in this upcoming victory. And I don't think it's working very well for the Iranians. It's not going to work. And yesterday already, the US was talking about degrading the ballistic capability by 85% in 4 days. So how long will it take to completely destroy this capability? And once they don't have ballistic missiles and they don't have drones, they are completely defenseless. And then the question is, what happens when they cannot shoot anything? At the same time, you are completely controlling the skies and shooting anything you want. How long is it until they say, okay, that's it? We're done. And so there's also a lot of psychology here, and it's very hard, when it comes to psychology, and to really pinpoint the moment when we start seeing a kind of collapse. And that's why speaking, there's a big question also, not just about the people and when are they going to rise, but the minorities. We see the Kurds arming themselves. We hear the Ahwazis today. The Ahwazis, by the way, they were an emirate until 1925 before the Iranians conquered them. So they all the time have a tendency, to look for independence. And this brings up a very, very big question, talking about strategy. What is Iran the day after in the eyes of the US and Israel? Is it a unified country with a new leader like Reza Pahlavi and moving towards democracy? Or is this country going to dismantle with all these different ethnic groups? And it's a serious question. I hope there is an answer, where all this is going, because it might be in a situation of being dismantled, or it might be stay unified but under another regime. It's a big question.
Some of the criticism of the war is that the Trump administration and Israel don't really have a plan for the day after. Do you disagree? Do you think both of you can answer? But I mean, you brought it up. But do you think there is a plan for what Iran looks like post the Islamic regime?
I'm going to step in here and start. I'm going to start a second. Amir, I know that you're going to continue as we go on, but because Michael, I don't necessarily, when Amir, as he presents it, I absolutely respect that. And I think that there are additional challenges and threats there. And it's not as just, yay, Israel's strength, keep going. I'm always worried about the fact that we never know when to stop. And I state that clearly right now. I think that that's a challenge that we have every single time because of our military prowess. We can. That doesn't mean we have to. And I say that when it comes to that aspect of the day after. There are 93 million Iranians. Not all of them are Persian speaking. The main language is Persian, of course, and there's a very long Persian culture. There are lots of ethnic and religious minorities inside Iran. They're so not homogeneous. Having said that, in the world today, in the geopolitics of the world, and this is a question that comes out not just about Iran, but about every single Middle Eastern country. It's one that's very focused right now on Syria, for example, that is post an enormous regime change, a magnitude of regime change. And there's the question of, does it stay unified in the same borders that were defined by outer colonial powers in World War I, or do we build new borders? And can you change borders? And who gets to break off? I think that one of the things that's really scaring all of the countries that surround Iran, and that includes also the countries that are heavily under attack by them right now, is that if it falls into chaos, meaning this regime falls, but nothing clear else comes out, which is similar to what happened in Libya and what's happened in Yemen and what happened in Syria for many years, then what happens is refugees. So add into the economic woes of the oil industry and the gas industry, and don't underestimate the tourist industry, because that was a very big part inside the Gulf area. We're talking about big things, and in Egypt for that matter. Add into all of that movement of people. Turkey's hosting over maybe 3.5 million Syrians. Turkey shares a border with Iran. It does not want to receive on and in. So when we talk about the day after, and I pose it because of that as a question and not an exclamation mark, I don't think that you can do it by an outer force with boots on the ground, because it's 93 million people, okay? You don't just come in and conquer it and have boots on the ground and do something. But the domestic aspect is not a clear-cut one. Pahlavi is very much revered outside of Iran. That doesn't mean that inside Iran they have wonderful memories of his father. Okay, let's not turn the Shah into a good guy. So that when we look at that, those differences of how they view it, I'm asking as a question. I don't know that chaos is better for anybody. And yes, I'd love a Western-oriented one, but I don't think that we can do that. We can enable it, but we can't do that. That's not the same thing. And I hope that in that sense, we keep that distance between attacking all of the military targets, enabling the people there to be able to change the regime, but not to expect them to change that regime into something which we're going to go, oh, now they're, they love us and that's what they're going to be doing. I just don't see that happening. And I'm very wary of the impact that we have, because I said, I'm always wary of our military might that's so effective, and our lack of capability over the last 2.5 years to turn that military might in so many arenas into a positive aspect after that. Look at the rest of the world right now that hates us. And we can say they're all stupid and they don't understand, but that also has to do with our use of military prowess without afterwards showing a clear-cut day after.
Great, thanks, Miri. Can I ask about, Iran's proxy strategy was Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis. That seems to have totally failed. Hamas hasn't done anything, and Hezbollah has sort of responded, but it hasn't been the kind of overwhelming force that possibly it could have been. So do you guys have a view on whether that proxy strategy, Israel's neutralized it? Amir, do you want to go?
Yeah,
I'll start and be succinct. Oh, sorry. Amir, you want to go first? Go for it.
So we are arriving to this stage of the war after we have degraded dramatically these proxies throughout the war. We went clockwise. We started with Hamas. We focused on Hamas, and we were on the defense on all other fronts. Then we shifted the center of gravity to Hezbollah and did an amazing attack on Hezbollah with the pagers, we all remember, and taking out Nasrallah and many of their strategic assets. From there, we moved to Syria. We destroyed completely the Syrian army and went into Syria, and were controlling the high grounds on the Hermon mountain. We dealt also with the Houthis and degraded them. And then we launched the attack on Iran. So when we are reaching this part of the war, this is after we really degraded all these proxies. So they're less effective. And by the way, I can tell you that the day we signed a ceasefire with Lebanon, I met with the previous Minister of Defense, Gallant, and he said to me, Amir, you know, Iran lost its strategic depths because this is their strategy. They use proxies to create strategic depths so they don't have to fight themselves. And once they lost Hezbollah and Hamas, not that they were completely eliminated, but they became really weak and irrelevant. He said they will shift now strategy and will make a run for nuclear weapons. And now the question is in this race, who attacks first? Are we going to stop them from becoming nuclear, or are they going to become nuclear? And the day we signed the ceasefire with Lebanon, the Prime Minister Netanyahu said, we signed the ceasefire, and we are shifting the whole center of gravity of Israel from Lebanon to Iran. Not many people listened to it because people were really busy with the hostages in Gaza, and the whole media was around Gaza. But at that moment, the whole Israeli defense establishment, all our industries, the Mossad, the army, all of the Israeli defense establishments started preparing for the biggest moment of all, the first ever attack of Israel on Iran. And in the months we prepared for this moment, Israel developed technologies that are beyond imagination, that bend the laws of physics and chemistry. Technologies, by the way, that not only enabled us to defeat Iran in 12 days and achieve our missions, it's technologies that are going to impact a decade ahead. Really amazing things were developed in Israel. And we fought in Iran, and we are fighting in Iran as if we are fighting in Gaza or in Lebanon. We're operating drones 2,000 kilometers from Israel as if we're operating them on our border. It's an amazing capability. And at the end of the day, instead of, again, just dealing with all these proxies, we understand that if we deal with Iran, with this regime, and the regime stops supporting these proxies, they will die. Or the countries will throw them out, just as we see now in Lebanon, and might happen also later on in Yemen. In Yemen, you have forces fighting the Houthis. You have the South Yemeni government, and you have the government supported also by Saudi Arabia. So dealing with Iran will impact the whole region and will enable to dismantle probably all these proxies. And as I said, we're not forgetting about Hamas. The IDF prepared a decisive plan to dismantle Hamas, and we'll go back to deal with this later on after we finish the job in Iran. Now, I want to address something that Miri said about knowing when to stop. First, I agree. You always need to know when to stop. But I think that Israel's problem is that in many occasions, Israel stopped too soon. There is a tendency, we just start fighting. Okay, when is it over? How do we finish this? What's the exit strategy? The strategy needs to be win the war. We need to win. We need to win the war. And when we win the war, we'll exit. And hopefully, and I agree that we cannot control a change of regime. We can facilitate that. The Iranian people need to change the regime. But we are going to put a lot of effort, both Israel and the US, to create the best terms possible for the Iranian people to take back their country and move towards the West and democracy and change their fate. And to get these best terms, you don't need to count days and weeks. So it will take a month more. It will take 2 weeks more. It will take 2 months more. What does it matter? Looking at what is ahead, looking at the opportunity, the huge, I would say almost biblical opportunity, we have to change everything in the region. So it's worthwhile to invest in it and do really whatever we can and not be like under pressure. We need to stop. Because if we stop too early, and we miss the opportunity, I can tell you 100% what will happen. We'll meet on Zoom again, maybe a year or 2 years from now, and talk about the next war. Because they will rebuild themselves, their capabilities again. It was amazing to see after the hit they got on the 12-day war, how fast they recovered. This is a very sophisticated country with very serious industries. They are very technological. And if they are obsessed with rebuilding their capabilities, they will rebuild them. So maybe it will take more time, but we'll find ourselves again fighting them. And we don't want that. We really, really want to see a real change. And we'll do everything possible to bring this reality to be.
One more question I want to ask is about the nuclear situation in Iran. You know, President Trump said that they destroyed Iran's nuclear facilities in the 12-day war, but now there's talk that they've been rebuilding. So Miri, do you have any insight into the highly enriched uranium? Did Iran manage to sneak that out? And do they still have access to it? And what can Israel do from the air, basically, to really dismantle their nuclear program and set it back not just a few months, but much further?
I want to be clear when I'm talking about boots on the ground, I'm talking about them being there for that aspect of a regime change. That does not mean you don't put very quiet, covert boots on the ground against lots of the different types of targets that you can be more effective and efficient against. And I'm saying that because the nuclear threat is one which, together with the missiles, it's also, I think that everybody always separates and only sees the nuclear, doesn't understand also the platforms from which those nuclear weapons can fly, are a huge issue. I do not know where the hundreds of kilograms of that over-enriched uranium is. And I don't know that anybody knows exactly right now. I say on the Israeli or the intelligence side, I absolutely think that we're hunting for it and looking for it, and that's part of the targets, okay? And I think that on those sort of things, I want to hope that that type of capability that we've shown, this isn't showing off killing all of the top people of the regime, both in June when we did so in the opening attack and now in on February 28th. That has to do with intelligence capabilities, with gathering capabilities, with understanding to a large degree the mindset of the other, using the technologies for you. So the Iranians are on a very high level. Michael, that's one of the things that, and Amir has been emphasizing that, I emphasize that. We're talking about a country that's highly educated. We're talking about a country that knows how to put satellites in the sky, ballistic missiles, supersonic missiles. This isn't something that most military industries can just do in their places around the world, and Iran can do so. So the fact that from June, they've been trying to recuperate and to redo, I kind of expected that, meaning June did not change the regime's focus. The regime's focus continued to be nuclear, missiles, proxies, destroy Israel. It's like that was the focus. And here we are now in trying to contend with it in a much more impacting way. When I say impacting, I'm still in that sense. I have a tendency to say this very often on Israeli TV more than anything else, where there are very few women who come and everything. I always say the fact that you have a strong voice and that you're from the military doesn't mean that your opinion is the only opinion, okay? And there's a difference between opinions and how we approach it, okay? I am less sure and certain of the capacity to endlessly go and attack against Iran. I think that the capacity of Israel as a country, we need to have an economy. People need to be at work. Children need to be in school. All of the things that right now, it was Purim, it was on the holiday. We haven't even noticed it so much. And I'm saying that because Sunday they're talking about school and what that does domestically inside a country. With all of the resilience that we have, and we are the most resilient country on earth, you cannot go on forever. And so you're going after the nuclear and what they're trying to do. The IA, in that sense, the International Atomic Agency, Energy Agency, has been very much, I want to even say, on board in trying to contain Iran, in focusing on it, in being very open about is yes being attacked, not being attacked, about what that means. And this isn't about being pro-Iran. Iran has signed on the NPT, and they have not fulfilled it for many, many, many years. And so I think that that's part of what we're doing. That's part of the targeting. That's part of the focus itself. But it isn't that they suddenly broke through and were doing something different. They still had to recuperate and recover, but they know how to recuperate and recover, and they know how to extend their capabilities. And as I said before, they are functioning. The fact that they're not managing to do things against us, we have absolute air superiority. I sure hope that they could do less than they're even doing now. But what they're doing still has an impact, and you cannot continue that impact in Israel endlessly. It just, we do not, and when I say endlessly, I'm not talking, like, I'm talking that at more than 2 weeks is something that becomes very difficult.
Agreed.
So guys, before we continue, and we're only going to keep you about another 15 minutes if that's okay with both of you, and let me tell you what's ahead. We want to talk about decapitating the regime and how do we get regime change in Iran. We also want to touch on the impact in the region. Russia, China, people have been asking questions. What do we learn about this, and how do we lead to a new Middle East as part of this war? And finally, we're going to talk about the impact on the Jewish communities around the world. But when we've got an audience of thousands and thousands of people watching us as we do this evening on Zoom, YouTube, and Facebook, we want to take this opportunity to raise some money for the Jewish National Fund. The reason being is they're first responders who are coming out when missiles are being hit, and the JNF has put together a project to be able to make sure that people who wish to make a donation towards first responders for fire protection equipment can do that. So Mike, before we continue, can I ask you just to play a 30-second video and to put up as well after that how people can make a donation if they'd like to do so in order to help the first responders in Israel itself.
Sure, Howard. Here we go.
So, Michael, in order to support first responders in Israel, get them firefighting equipment, you're going to put a QR code up onto the screen now. We're going to continue talking, but we'll leave that up for about a minute. We ask people if you can take your cell phone and point your camera at the QR code, and that will allow you to open up a screen and make a donation through to the JNF, and we'll make sure that every cent goes through to Israel to first responders. We don't want to let this opportunity go by without giving people an opportunity to be part of the protection and the safety of the people of Israel. So, Mike, if you can leave that up for a minute. The other thing that I'm going to ask people to do is, we have Miri and Amir who've given up their evening to be able to educate us and to inform us firsthand. I want you to use this opportunity as well, whether you're watching us on YouTube, on Zoom, or on Facebook, to please leave them a message of thanks, because their generosity of spirit that we've seen from them this evening, the insights that they've given us are unparalleled. There is nowhere else that you can get this level of information, the sort of thing that we at the Jewish Report have really brought to our community and Jewish communities, and not just Jewish communities around the world. When we see that we're being watched in places like Canada and the United States and England and Australia and Israel, people rely on us as their primary source of information. So also take a moment and let us know in the chats where you're actually watching us this evening. So with that, Amir, how do you bring down a regime in Iran? It doesn't seem to be such an easy thing.
Well, I think that the understanding that there is a possibility to do so is the rising of the Iranian people, as we saw a month and a half ago. So millions all over Iran, they have nothing to lose. There is no water in Iran. This regime cannot provide electricity. The currency is broken. There is no economy. They're using all the money, to fund the terror throughout the region and globally. And the people are fed up. But we saw that this regime has the power to oppress them. We saw this regime killing tens of thousands of people. And I think that at the end of the day, the understanding was very simple. If we destroy the leadership, destroy their infrastructure, their capabilities, and destroy the oppressing forces that are oppressing the Iranian people. Then the Iranian people will be able to rise and take over their country. And this is what is being done now. Maybe we'll manage to destroy everything, and they are not going to do so. And maybe they will rise. I must say that I'm very optimistic. The 90 million people of Iran are the boots on the ground. They are the ones that need to take the responsibility, and I think they understand. They have one chance to do it, a real chance. And this is the message that President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu are sending again and again. This is an historical moment. This is your moment. We're with you. We're controlling your skies. We're destroying this regime that has oppressed you. We're here for you. All you need to do, step out of your houses to the streets. Go and take your country. Now, it's not happening now because we really want to first finish the job and deal with all these oppressors. But it will happen in the coming weeks. And this is not supposed to be a long war. This operation was planned for 5 weeks. Now we're talking about shortening it to a month because they're managing to move forward faster than they thought. And once all these targets will be hit and this regime will be dismantled, then the people will have the chance to do something about it. And the other thing is really to see what happens with all these minorities that have been oppressed, and are they going to do something about it? We see President Trump directly addressing the Kurds and saying, I will support you, I will give you our support. Go and fight. And the Ahwazis, same thing. So many things can happen, and I think that these dynamics, they will evolve. It's hard to predict at what pace and how much time it will take. But if I have to bet on it, I would say this regime is going down. This regime is going to change eventually. How long? Very fast. Not fast? I don't know. But I don't see this regime managing to survive this reality.
Miri, I'd love you to comment on that as well, because we've seen the brutality of the regime on the 8th and 9th of January. Somewhere between 30 and 40,000 people were slaughtered by their own government, 330,000 people injured. Will people take to the streets again to overthrow their government in the end once the big air campaign is over? Is it that simple?
It's never simple, but it is as simple as that. I think that even now you can see Iran put itself from Saturday under a total internet closure. So we're not actually seeing anything coming out of Iran except what the regime wants us to see. And everybody needs to realize that we don't know right now if people are going out trying to do more things. It's very difficult to get any kind of material out from there at all. I'm going to add in something that we're not necessarily noticing, and it's something that I saw also coming up in the questions inside. The regime has already changed, however. We killed Ali Khamenei. We killed the top 40 people. And I say that because they're already, just because of that, is a generational change. That doesn't mean that now they're good guys. But it already means that it's not the old 85-year-old who was there for the last 43 years doing pretty much whatever he wanted, both as the religious authority and as the regime authority. They're now about to choose. They're talking about choosing his son. But when I look at that right now, it's already a different cadre of people who in this horrific terror regime are changing. And they can morph. And here I'm going to say, I don't expect them to suddenly become Zionists and understand that Herzl had a good idea. But I do think that you can see a more moderate version that's going to try to acquiesce with their own people, because otherwise they're going to be overthrown. And in its own way, I think that for Israel, that's almost the worst, is that it would actually, the regime would kind of stay the same and be as if more moderate, but not really. And I say that because we have to, at the end, that either or, I do not expect the people to come out and say we want democracy. Democracy is not a Persian word. It is not a Middle Eastern word, except for in Israel. They have other words about civic society and how you run that. And sometimes always I want them to run it in a way where first and foremost, we're not the aim of the regime in destroying us. That they build something which is not about exporting this revolution, this Islamic revolution, through the proxies and destroying Israel, Rather, it's about, building Persia and Iran. And I say that right now because I want to say as a good point, not as a bad point, that I do not like the new guy in Syria. And we've talked about that just a bit over the last year. Okay. But I think that he's way better than the guy before him. And at least in his rhetoric and in some of his actions, because he's been killing his own people too, but in his rhetoric and some of his actions, he is trying to build a new Syria. That at the moment, the main focus is not about destroying Israel. Can we arrive at something like that in Iran? Meaning, I'm much less ambitious than what Amir said before. I feel that if there can be a regime change, which is, it's now about Iran, it's not about the West, and it's not about let's be part of that, but it's about Iran and building Iran and doing something which is not about the proxies, the missiles, and nuclear. I'm willing to take that as a win. That's not the total win that Amir was talking about before. We have differences in that sense, and I'm giving it because there are different ways of approaching it at all.
So, Miri, I think there's probably no one who understands the regional power plays within the Middle East better than yourself. And if we were to, if we were to look 6 months in advance, 12 months in advance, 2 years in advance, what does the Middle East look like? Has this war reshaped what we see for the future for the entire region?
The October 7th war already did that. Again, we're focusing right now on what started on February 28th, but Amir and I both very much clearly said October 7th is the beginning of the war that we're in. Right now, we're in high intensity against Iran, but it's part of the same war, and the Middle East has changed. The Middle East has shifted from Iran being the one recalling the rules of the game through the proxies, through that different Shiite crescent. That does not exist anymore already. And I'm not even talking about, and now we're looking at Iran at the head of the snake so that they won't be able to rebuild themselves and redo that. It's already changed. It's already just the fact that the alliances that Israel built, both with the UAE and with Bahrain, and quiet ones with other ones in the Middle East, they survived this entire war and the horrible aspects of what happened about it. If it's with Gaza and Hamas, etc., here we are, it's still there. So that, yes, I absolutely see a new Middle East. There are lots of opportunities. And I always say there are threats, and I could give you the list. But when you only look at it through the threats, you sometimes also miss opportunities. Sometimes you have to be very strong and take advantage of the opportunities. So there are other countries now, again, like Syria in that sense, is both a threat and an opportunity. Lebanon is certainly, with Hezbollah, a threat and yet an opportunity. And those are countries that border us. And they're totally changed already, okay? Lebanon has, it's amazing. You realize that today they kicked out the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. They outlawed Hezbollah. I'm like, Lebanon, that country to my north? And for most Israelis, that's not enough. But that's a huge change. In Syria, they also stopped in a lot of different ways. They're not allowing Iran in any way to be there. The Syrian president, in his own voice, has said that he's against the Islamic regime. He wouldn't allow the Iranians to be there. That's a new Middle East. We want it to be at the end even way better. And to get to that way better is to take care of the head of the snake. To take care of the head of the snake is to attack the way that we are Iran. But you don't know what the result will be. So I'm in that new Middle East, and we're going in a good direction. I'm willing in my targets to be a little lower than Amir. I think that for me, new Lebanon and new Syria are not what I would like, but they're way better than what they were before. And I'd like to see new Iran, perhaps not exactly what I like, but way better than before. And that will enable a whole continuation to build, not necessarily in high intensity warfare.
Amir, you started at the beginning of almost sketching what a new Middle East could look like. Do you think this leads to closer relations with the UAE? Do you think this leads to normalization with Saudi Arabia? Does this open the door to Indonesia? Where do you think we'll be in a year or 2 years' time?
Oh, I'll answer that, but I want to say something about Israel. And I said it at the beginning of the war, even before we attacked Lebanon and the pages and everything we saw since. And I said from the beginning that the bigger the win will be, the more decisive the win will be in this war, the greater the golden age of Israel will be the day after. And I can tell you that the day after this war, there will be peace agreements. And the Israeli economy is going to boom. It's already booming. It's going to boom much more than now. And there's going to be massive aliyah to Israel. And there's going to be baby boom. We spend a lot of time in the shelter, you know. So I think that we are on the verge of a great, great era for Israel. And I encourage everybody who is listening to us, make sure you have a stake in this future. Don't miss it, because Israel is the future of the Jewish people. And I'm sure that following this war, we'll see the signing of peace agreements. We might see this already now. I mean, this year, even before elections that are projected to be in September or October. Yes, we'll see normalization with many countries, hopefully also with Iran, and really a completely different future. Also talking about economy and prosperity and so on. And I must tell you that as optimistic as I am about the future of Israel and where these things are going, I'm very, very pessimistic as for anti-Semitism and the growth. I'm afraid it's going to grow exponentially. And Israel will have to deal with this. I mean, we have a responsibility. We're a strong country to defend Jews wherever they are, and really be much more proactive when talking about delegitimation and anti-Semitism. And at the same time, facilitate for Jews to make Aliyah and invest in Israel. We're not doing enough. And because I project that many Jews will come to Israel, we have to get ready for that. For a day, people will make Aliyah, because the Jewish Agency is talking about 1 million Jews that are getting ready to come to Israel. They're waiting for the end of the war. And once there are peace agreements and the war will end, we'll see a very bright future.
Which segues perfectly to our last question of the evening, and that's from Michael, because Michael wants to discuss threats to the Jewish community around the world. We've seen already calls for potentially sleeper cells to awaken, for Jewish communities around the world to be much more vigilant. I know, Michael, you want to ask that as the final question of the evening.
Yeah, we live here in South Africa on the southern tip, and we saw what happened in Bondi in December. And of course, our community worries about Iran's reach. And so do you have a view on sort of should we be more worried, and what can we do as communities here to sort of protect ourselves from the threat that Iran strikes out by going after local Jewish communities like they did in Argentina all those years ago?
So, Michael, it's not just sadly the Iranians. And I say that because we have to breathe in deep. And I'm going to say two different things. One, I feel that I have the advantage that I was not born in Israel, and my native language is American, and I have all of my relatives are in the United States. And I, different from many other people, I think that Jewish communities around the world should thrive. I love the Jewish diaspora, and I love that give and take of having a Jewish diaspora and a state of Israel. Having said all of that, for a variety of reasons, and a lot of that has to do with both the Islamic regime, with horrific psychological information warfare that has been going on for many, many, many years. But I have to add in, that's not just coming from Iran. That's been coming from Qatar. And so it's both Muslim Brotherhood Qatar and its Islamic regime. And what it brings at the end is a variety of threats. I think, having been hosted by you in South Africa, but I saw that you have hosts all around the world, and I saw that you have now from Canada, so many people from around the world. I say, sadly, you are all targets. I think that Jewish communities worldwide right now are very aware of that. I have seen everybody. I mean, at the end, I've been in the States and in Canada for a lot over the last few months. And I say that because I see how they're taking it, and they take the threat seriously. And I sadly say, I don't think, like Amir said, they're not going to get lower, they're going to get higher. And part of that has to do with Israel's change of strategy, which means that we're going on the offensive. And I want us to be on the offensive, and I don't want us to be the ones that are passive and waiting and only responding. I like the fact that we're on the offensive, but it has an impact on all of you, because that type of strategy is viewed right now by leaderships in many of your countries in a very negative way. And as I always say, like the leadership of your own country says that what we're doing is horrific, and I'm not using the words right now, that opens up the possibility that your local population, not only recruited by Iran or by Muslim Brotherhood, there are lots of different options there when it comes to the voices of terrorism, but that horrific I want to say misguided, but it's so much worse than that, presentation, so slanted, so horrific of what we're doing, is one that brings about, it's like it inspires. And as I always end with this one here, terrorism is about education and innovation. And those are not the two terms that you expect to find when you talk about terrorism. But people are recruited through education, and inside terrorism, they're very innovative. And so I say, sadly, yes, you have to look at that. I think that in South Africa, of all places, you were very aware of threats. I think the United States is waking up to different kinds of threats, to the type of anti-Semitism they didn't have before. And I think that a lot of the European Jews are going to leave Europe. And I just said something so generalization right now, because I absolutely see the million Jews that are going to want to move here, because you don't want to live in a place where you're living behind a guard all the time, that anything you do is perceived in such a horrific way. So yeah, we have a lot on our table.
Thanks, Miri. Miri, do you want to say a final word? Anything you'd like to say about the...
So, you really go into details. How it's amazing to see how many 7th of October we had throughout history without having Israel. Again and again and again, we had pogroms, the size and level of 7th of October all around the world, especially in Europe, in East Europe, in Ukraine, in Russia, Poland. Anti-Semitism didn't start in 1948. It's been around for thousands of years. It's not going anywhere. So yeah, we need to be aware. We need to be proactive, and I think that Israel needs to see it as a campaign that Israel needs to deal with and lead. We're not taking responsibility as a Jewish state to the extent we should, to deal with this phenomena and help protect Jews around the world and fight all this information war. We can do it much better if we want to, and if we want to invest in doing so, and we should. Also intelligence, Mossad, that is responsible for really monitoring what's going on in the Jewish world. But our problems are not just anti-Semitism, it's also assimilation on an alarming pace. Something we haven't seen in thousands of years. So on one hand, we need to be really proactive, and there needs to be awareness and readiness, and there's a lot to do. On the other hand, I'll say something harsh, but I think the truth needs to be said. There is no future for Jews in the diaspora in the long term. I think the real future is in Israel. And
I disagree.
Yeah, you can disagree, but I'm saying, when you have 80% of the Jews in the US assimilating, there is no future.
No.
And I think that I would really encourage every family, at least if you don't make Aliyah, have a stake in Israel. Invest, buy an apartment. Because I can tell you that in a few years, even if you will want to buy an apartment, I'm not sure there will be one. I mean, we're not building in the pace that is in line with the amount of Jews that are supposed to come to Israel. It is going to be a very big challenge. So I think Jews need to have a stake in Israel and prepare for the future. And Israel needs to be proactive and defend the Jews wherever they are. We have to connect Israel and the Jewish diaspora much, much better than we're doing at the moment.
Great, thank you. If there might not be apartments, but the JNF always have trees for people to buy to have a stake in Israel.
And what better way to end a webinar in the most Jewish way possible? A disagreement. I don't think the people watching actually appreciate and understand how fortunate we are to have two of the greatest strategic military minds in Israel spend an entire evening with us. So from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank Miri, you for the fourth time, and Amir for the first, but certainly not the last time. I just want to thank you so much for giving so generously of your time to our community and to the Jewish community around the world, and not just the Jewish community, because 30-40% of the people who watch us around the world are not Jewish at all, but they care passionately about issues that are important to our community, care passionately about Israel, and are really determined to be educated. What you guys have done this evening is a true blessing for all of us. I want to thank the thousands and thousands of people who've watched us this evening, and the many more thousands of people who will watch us the coming week on YouTube after we post this. It has been so informative, so inspiring, and also a little frightening. War is not a game. And people die, and innocent people die, and there will be casualties as part of this process. And we have to think of the innocents on all sides who will pay a terrible price for potentially a greater good. I want to thank you all for watching this evening. We'll be back on Sunday as well with Paula Sleer, who's going to tell us her remarkable story of being a war journalist around the world and her experiences in love, which maybe turned out to be the greatest war of all. With that, I'm going to turn off our cameras, and all our guests will turn off their cameras and their audio. Mike, if people haven't yet made a donation, please, if you can put back your QR code so people can make a donation to the JNF for firefighting equipment, to make sure that first responders actually get the opportunity to be able to be protected as they respond to missile strikes and drone strikes throughout Israel. And just a huge thank you to all of you who watched this evening. We really appreciate all of your interests. On behalf of the Jewish Report and Michael, on behalf of the JNF as well, a huge thank you to you all. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Please also, if you haven't said thank you to our two guests, take this last moment to be able to do that. Thank you and good night to everyone.